Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I am here today to share with you some embossing and die cutting with Rinea Foil and Clair stamps. This entire month, Clair is going to be partnering with Rinea Foil. So this entire month I will be using this foil along with all of my Clair stamps. Now I have 3 cards to share with you today, but first I want to show you this foil. So this foil comes in different variety packs, or you can buy a pack of just like the gold or different things like that. Now, here's a look at some of the selection that they have. Now, this foil is unique, and that is almost like a paper. However, if you fold it, it keeps its shape, so it's great for making 3D embellishments. Now, you don't need a laser printer, you don't need a laminator or a Mink or any type of special glue for this. You use it just like paper, but there are some really cool techniques you can do with it. Today I'm going to show you how I use it in embossing and die cutting. Now you can see this cuts very well in my paper trimmer, and I'm going to use this just like I would a piece of paper in my embossing folder. So I'm going to be doing some dry embossing with it. Now I wanted the gold side to be facing up, and like I said before, this is double-sided, so it has a gold side and a green side on this piece. And I wanted that gold side to be facing up, so I wanted those raised edges in there, so I made sure I put it in my folder that way. Now I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine just like I would any other embossing folder and piece of paper. And there you can see I've got a beautiful wood grain texture now on my paper. I also did some die cutting with another piece of gold foil, and I just ran that through my die cutting machine like I would a piece of paper with a circle die, and you can see how beautifully it die cut. Now, one technique that I wanted to do on this was actually sand away some of that color. So underneath that gold is actually a silver, and then underneath that silver is like a paper middle. So I just took my sanding block and I'm going to sand away the top of this and give it kind of a worn look. And I'm just going back and forth in different directions. You don't want to be too rough with this because you will flatten out those embossed edges, but I wanted to put that embossing in there before I did the sanding, so I would just sand over the raised edges. Now I'm just looking at that, and you can see I've kind of roughed up the surface. It doesn't dull the shine at all. It's still just as shiny. I'm just taking away a little of that color for a distressed look. Now I also did the same thing on that circle, and I just went around the edges on this. So I'm using my same sanding block. If you don't have a sanding block, you could use an emery board, a nail file, anything like that, something sandpaper if you have that on hand. And then I just picked it up, and you can see here that's where that bends. Your paper will bend, and it will also hold its shape if you bend it. So it's great for those 3D accents. So again, I just went around this circle just on the edges of this to kind of distress those up, mark them up, give them a little scuffed look. Now I also want to add a little bit of embossing powder to this for more of a textured look, even more so than with just the embossing. So I took my Versamark ink pad and I am just rubbing over those raised edges and then all around the edges, just very, very lightly. I didn't want to get really any in between like the little crevices of the wood. And then I also came in and did it on that circle on the edges as well. And you can see my circle bending here again. That's okay, it flattens right back out. But once I had that done, I went ahead and brought out this gold glitter embossing powder from Wow. I'm not sure the exact name. I'll have it linked over on my blog. But I'm just going to sprinkle that over the entire thing, and it's going to stick in different places just where that Versamark touched my paper. Now, one thing I will say about embossing this, you need to be very careful because the foil will want to pull away from that center paper. So just make sure that you have your heat gun nice and hot and you don't keep it on the same spot too long. Treat it kind of like you would vellum. Keep moving it around so you don't burn your paper and you'll be good to go. So once I had that covered, I went ahead and did the edges on my circle, and you can see it's sticking in random places, which was the exact look I was going for. Then I went ahead and heat set that, and now I've got this great textured, shiny, and now glittered paper ready to go on my card. I did not put the entire card making process of any of these cards in the video because there are 3 different cards to share. But here's a nice close-up of that embossed, both dry and wet embossing on that gold foil paper. Here's a closer look at the completed card. I used the Faith Quote stamp set, the God's Got This sentiment in that stamp set. I stamped that on a white cardstock circle, popped that on top of the gold foil circle, and then matted that on top of a craft circle that was a slightly larger circle. I went ahead and mounted that wood paper that I made onto a craft panel, and I mounted both of those a little bit kittywampus, I guess you could say, on an A2 top folding card base to complete my entire card. It was that simple. Now moving on to my next card, I'm going to be using this great new stamp set from Clair as well. And it is called Out of This World. So you have all of these great different images. I'm going to be using the little spaceman and also the Earth in there, but there are some awesome planets and stars and a little alien in there. So you could make an entire stamp scene, a space scene, and that would be awesome. You could do a bright sun on one side and have your planets going out across the card. A lot of ideas. I'm going to be doing this card you see here. So before I move on to the foil part of this card, I'm going to share with you how I created that background. On the left hand side, you'll see all the distressings that I used, and I also used white acrylic paint for this background, and I'll show you how I did all this very, very quickly. So starting out, I am starting with picked raspberry. You can start with any of your colors you want to first. I just like a pink and a purple and a blue. So I am just laying down big splotches of this, and I am telling you, this background is going to look like a hot mess until I get done with it. It always does. I always scare myself, and it always ends up working out. So if you feel like you're on that track when you're making a background like this, you're probably doing it right. So I also used a little bit of seedless preserves, and I blended that into the picked raspberry. Then in a few other spots, I'm going to blend in some peacock feathers. Now, those are going to be my colors that are going to peek through from the background, so most of that's going to be covered up, so don't worry about your blending too awfully much. Once that was done, I came in with a little bit of hickory smoke. I find if I lay down a gray first and then my black over it, I get more blendability and I can move around the color a little bit better. So I like to do this extra step, but it's not necessary. Building up the color, especially on regular cardstock, can really help that distressing slide around, but it's also going to make it more reactive. So don't put your fingers directly on this once you get it covered. You can see I'm using a piece of paper to hold it down. You'll want to make sure you have something to cover up where your fingers are. So I went ahead and filled in all my extra spaces with hickory smoke. Now I'm coming in with black soot over the top of the entire piece of paper. And you can see it's covering up a lot of that color. But that's okay. It's still going to have little peek-throughs here and there. And it'll all end up looking really nice. You don't want a lot of the color peeking through, but you do want some of it. Now I'm coming back in with that gray just to move around the black a little bit more and let a little bit more of that color peek through. And now I'm going to add my stars. So for my stars, I like to use acrylic paint. And I like to use 2 layers of it. So on this first layer, I'm actually going to put just a drop on an acrylic block and add a little bit of water to it. This is going to water down my paint, make it more runny, a little bit more fluid so I can splatter it a little bit better, but it's also going to take away a little bit of that opaqueness. So it's not going to be stark white on that background. This is great for those farther away stars, I guess you could say. And I'm going to just take this, I've put my background in a box, and I am just flicking on that paint. I like to put it in a box to keep the paint contained. I did it once without the box, and I ended up with like paint on my tablet that I was watching Netflix on at the time. It just got everywhere. So I learned my lesson the hard way the first time, and I put it in a box and do my splattering in there now. So I'm just randomly splattering this. If you get a few little like streams, that's okay. Those kind of look like galaxies to me. And now I'm coming in with my second layer, and this one I didn't dilute down any at all with water. I'm not going to use quite as much of this, and I'm not going to splatter as much on, but this will give me a more opaque looking star, which looks like it's closer up. So you can see I am flicking away here and really filling up this background, and I'll also come in at the final end with my finger on the brush and really give it a good splattering then. So while that was drying, I went on and I'm making my moon for the bottom of the card. Now I cut some silver foil with a circle die cut in my die cutting machine like I would any other piece of paper, and for this I'm actually going to be using a stencil and my stylus to emboss. I put a piece of fun foam right underneath that stencil, so a nice soft surface. If you don't have fun foam, you can use a mouse pad, just anything soft that's going to have a little bit of give. You might even be able to use a very thick magazine, possibly, that might work. Just something for a little bit of cushion so you can push in that foil around the stencil. Now this is just a circle stencil. If you didn't have something like this, you can make your own with circle die cuts, punches. You could even cut it out freehanded if you wanted to. Just something to get a little bit of texture in that foil. And I'm sorry if you heard that in the background. We have a weather alert, so my phone lets me know. And I am just switching up this stencil back and forth here and using the larger point on my stylus. I felt like the smaller point might be a little bit too rough and poke through this paper. So I am just using the larger point on that to just give this a nice embossed look. Now if you don't have a stylus, you could also use maybe a pen that doesn't have any ink left in it, a rollerball pen. Something just with a little circle point on it to get those embossed lines in there. So to put this on the bottom of the paper, I am just using double-sided adhesive. I'm going to line that up, and then any extra that hangs over, I can just trim away with my scissors. It trims away so easily and so cleanly. So I just trim that up right along the bottom and also on the two sides. Now for this card, I just popped up my sentiment on a banner, popped up my little spaceship and my earth, and this card was good to go. Here's a closer look at that embossed moon on the very bottom of the card. I love the way that turned out. So onto my final card, I wanted to show you that not only will this die cut your simple shapes, I've done circles so far in the video, it will also die cut some of these more intricate shapes, but I also wanted to share with you, because stitching is so popular, that it will pick up that stitched look in the foil too. Now for this card I'm going to be using the brand new Fly With Me stamp set. I've got some cloud and landscape border dies. Those are from Mama Elephant, but a lot of different companies make these. You might even have some on hand, but these have the stitching detail in them, which I wanted. So I cut a piece of green cardstock that would line up on the bottom, and now I'm going to go on with my sky. I've got a dark blue foil paper here, and then I've also got a lighter blue cardstock. I'm lining these both up together so I can inlay these and do different layers of clouds. So on the bottom there, I line that up and cut through, and there you can see I've got that bottom blue piece that I'm going to be using the lighter blue cardstock on. Then for my center, I'm going to go ahead and line this up again right in my die cutting machine. And I'll just go ahead and place that same die that I used. I'll just offset it a little bit. Place that right above there and cut this again. Now cutting these both at the same time allows me to not have to do any measuring or anything. I can just go and inlay these when I'm all done. But here is the piece of the blue foil that I'm going to use on this card, and you can see that it picked up that stitching beautifully on this die, and it's going to inlay perfectly right over that first cloud that I die cut. Now I'm just going to die cut that final piece at the very top, which is going to be the light blue cardstock again. I'll line that up, offset it just a little bit from my last die cut, and run this through my die cutting machine as well. There you can see I've got some of those balloons stamped out as well as the clouds. I fussy cut them and then ran a black marker along the edge of those, and now it's time to put this card together. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put down my cloud background. Now I had I need to go ahead and sharpen my blade and my trimmer, or just get a new one. So I did have a few little scragglies. I used my sanding block just to get rid of those. And now I'm going to put this together. So I first put that blue cloud down. Next up, I'm going to use the same double-sided adhesive, it's just a paper tape, on that foil as well, and stick that right over the top of the first cloud that I inlaid. And next up comes that final cloud cardstock at the very top. For this portion of the grass, I'm going to pop this up with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive right at the end of it, just for a little bit more dimension and a little bit more interest on that card front. And now, before I do anything else, or no, this was the card I messed up on. I didn't stamp my sentiment. I did go ahead and add in my balloons before I added my sentiment. I'll show you how I fixed that though, now that I remember. So I went ahead and put my balloons on with some more fun foam and double-sided adhesive, as well as those clouds. I just popped those up a little bit more with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive as well. Now, these 3 clouds come in the stamp set, and you have 3 different options, which I love, so none of them look the same. Now, here's where I realized I didn't stamp my sentiment before I put anything down. So I've got quite a bit of dimension. So what I like to do here is I've got my Misty out. I just take that foam pad out of it that you normally use with your clear stamps. Since I already have foam in there, it's going to fit perfectly and I won't get any smushed edges or weird looking sentiment. I'm stamping the Fly Away With Me sentiment in the bottom left hand corner, and I'll just go ahead and give that a double stamping so it's nice and dark. And once that was finished, that finished off that card for today. But here is a close-up photo of that finished card. You can see this foil layers up beautifully, it inlays beautifully, and also it picks up that stitching detail beautifully as well, which I love. That does it for today, guys. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a few different links you can click on, of course. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting.